Hey, I'm Elliot and I drive for Uber. I've had my fair share of strange experiences, but this one really sticks out. It happened one night when I was driving through the Desert of the Lions. If you're not from around here, it's a wooded area with a reputation for ghost stories. I picked up a passenger heading to a small town called Tettlepan. The ride was pretty uneventful until I dropped him off. I was relieved and headed back to the city, ready to end my shift. But the way back wasn't as smooth. I was cruising along this winding, deserted road when one of my tires suddenly went flat. Frustrated, I pulled over and got out to check it. The night air was cold and heavy, and the darkness of the forest felt oppressive. I knew I had to change the tire fast, so I got to work. But as I struggled with the tire, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching me from the trees. The noises from the forest were eerie, cracking branches, an icy wind that sometimes blew hard. I felt like I was hearing voices and the occasional howl of some nocturnal animal. I remembered the ghost stories about this road and felt fear creeping in, but I tried to stay calm and keep working. Finally, I got the tire changed and got back in the car, eager to leave. But as I drove slowly down the highway, the feeling of being watched didn't go away. In fact, it got worse. It was then that I felt an extra weight on the car, like something had gotten on board without me noticing. I couldn't see anything, but the presence was undeniable. My unease turned into silent panic, my heart racing. I made it to a tire shop to get help to put the tire on properly. While the workers checked the car, I noticed something that froze my blood. A dark silhouette inside the vehicle. I couldn't make out its features, but its presence was clearly visible. I tried to keep my composure until they finished. When I finally left, I felt completely drained, like I was lacking energy. I got home and collapsed, sleeping most of the next day. But my dreams were filled with nightmares about that dark entity, feeding on my fear. The following days were a torment. Every time I picked up a passenger, they canceled the trip as soon as they saw me, saying there was someone else in the car. The entity that had gotten in that night was still there, invisible to me but clearly perceptible to others. I felt powerless and scared, losing clients and having to borrow money from my brother to pay my Uber bills. Desperate, I sought help from my aunt, who's into esoteric stuff. She's known as a good witch. When I told her what happened, she said I'd had a nocturnal encounter with a dark entity that had clung to my car. According to her, these beings can follow people in moments of vulnerability, feeding on their energy and fear. My aunt helped me perform a cleansing ritual to expel the entity. We prepared a series of elements and did the ritual in the car, invoking protective forces and asking the dark being to leave. It was exhausting, but in the end, I felt a huge relief, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. We went back to the same spot where my tire had gone flat. My aunt started yelling at the entity to stay there because it wasn't invited to accompany me. She talked nonsense and used vulgar words, telling it we didn't want it in our lives. It was like that for about an hour until she finally said everything was ready. I felt free, like the Uber was clean again. The cancellations stopped, and passengers no longer saw any strange companion in the car. However, I still haven't forgotten that experience. Sometimes when I drive at night on lonely roads, I feel a pang of fear. But my aunt told me that fear is what feeds those entities. She said nocturnal encounters with dark beings aren't good for anyone's life. If I hadn't done the cleansing, she warned, it could have caused an accident, and I wouldn't be here to tell the story. If you're enjoying the video, please subscribe to the channel for future videos, and like and share with your friends. I'm Anna, and I want to share a terrifying experience I had. It's not paranormal, but it's just as scary. I always used the Uber app, and the trips were always safe for me. I'd share my trips with my friends after a party or meeting, and sometimes with my family. I was in the state of Mexico when this happened. It was December, and the work posada ended around 2 a.m. Adrian offered to take me home, but I declined because he had to travel around the city first. Marta had already left and asked me to go with her and her brother, but I said no. A few minutes later, a driver accepted my ride request and said she'd be there soon. My friends went their separate ways and I sent them the trip details. I even took a screenshot of the driver's info just in case. It was late, so I sent the info to my mom, even though she was in another state. She said she'd keep an eye on my route. The car arrived and I got in. The driver greeted me and asked if I was ready to go. I nodded and turned on my Maps app to make sure we stayed on track. The ride was pleasant. The driver, a woman with 2 small kids, seemed friendly. We chatted like old friends. Suddenly, she got a call. She said yes a few times, then got quiet. The voice on the other end was yelling at her. She got nervous and pulled over, telling me to get out. She said someone was waiting for me 2 blocks ahead and had given her a password, including what I was wearing and my name. They told her to drop me off at a certain place and leave. I got nervous, grabbed my stuff and got out. She told me to turn off my phone and said, "God bless you." Then she left. I didn't know where to go. I saw a little restaurant that was closing and went in. There was a lady with 2 boys about to close up. When she saw me, she told them to lower the steel curtain. I started crying and begged for help. She told me to calm down and said I was safe. I told her what happened, and my phone kept ringing. She told me not to answer it, so I silenced it. Her son arrived a few minutes later. He gave me a cup of tea to calm me down. He suggested I not go to my apartment because we didn't know what could happen. My phone kept ringing, so I turned it off. Before doing that, I called my mom to explain and tell her not to answer any calls. Fortunately, she hasn't heard from them since. The lady asked if I had any relatives in the city, but her son interrupted and said it was best not to talk to anyone because the situation was strange. I told them I had warned my friends and my mom. The lady said, "Think the worst and you'll be right," because some of my friends were probably in on it. I spent the rest of the night with them. In the morning, they took me to get my stuff. I didn't stay long. When I turned my phone back on, I had tons of missed calls and messages, mostly from Adrian, who wanted to know where I was. He sent over 50 messages, all very insistent. The lady and her son took me to the airport, and I bought a ticket to leave the city. I haven't been back since. I thanked them for their help, deleted all my social media accounts, changed my phone number, and cut off contact with Kuudamak because he would have given my location to Adrian. I also stopped talking to the lady and her son because it was safer. A few days later, I found out that they found the body of a woman, an Uber driver, in a garbage dump. She had been missing for weeks. She was my driver that night. The guilt and depression hit me hard. I hope sharing my experience helps someone. It was terrifying, and for me, it was worse than seeing a ghost. My name is Heriberto Osuna, and I've been driving for Uber in Tijuana, Mexico, for about 4 years now. I've had my fair share of strange experiences, but this one sticks out. It happened last year on the eve of Halloween. Tijuana is a border city, and Halloween is a big deal here. Kids in costumes, parties everywhere. It was a busy night for me. I dropped off a fare at the airport around midnight when I got a new request. Even though the wait would be about 20 minutes, the passengers accepted. When I got there, I saw 2 girls and a young man who seemed pretty drunk. They were holding him up so he wouldn't fall, and they were laughing, making fun of him. One of the girls let out this really evil laugh, and even in the low light, I could see something off about her. She seemed tense, and the young man didn't say a word the whole time. I dropped them off on Avenida Revolution. They paid me and arranged another ride for the young man. They overpaid me and went into one of those dives on the avenue. I didn't think much of it until I started to tell the young man we were almost at his place. I looked in the rearview mirror and he looked really bad. I thought he was just really drunk or had taken something illegal, or worse, that he was dead. I told him we were there, but he just looked strange. Suddenly, the boy started screaming. It made me nervous. When I asked him what was wrong, he couldn't speak. I turned on the interior light to see what was going on, and despite his dark costume, I could see blood. A lot of it. I had to call emergency services because the boy was bleeding badly. I felt like everything was going wrong. I realized something had happened to this young man, and I was in the middle of it. One of the girls let out another scream, even worse than the first one. It was the most grotesque thing I'd ever seen, and I had to pull over because I was going to vomit. Luckily, there were people nearby, and they heard the boys' screams and started to come over. Some brought towels to try to stop the bleeding. It was a horrible scene. The ambulance finally arrived, and so did the police. They started asking me questions, but the good thing about Uber is that the trips are traceable. They took my statement and told me not to leave town. I got home in the morning, and I swear I had nightmares in the few hours I managed to sleep. Around 3 p.m., they came for me again to give my statement. They asked me to identify the girls, and I recognized one by her evil laugh. She was the boy's cousin, Dulce. The young man made his statement, and I was cleared of any involvement. The authorities told me the boy had no idea who those women were. His cousin had invited him to a supposed Halloween party, but it was all a setup. Those women were part of some sort of coven, and they needed a person for a ritual. They drugged him, and he didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. The boy was only 18 years old. He trusted his cousin, who ruined his life in an instant. She confessed to everything. I don't know how far the investigation went, but I hope she spends a long time locked up for what she did. That experience gave me chills. You never know who gets into your car, especially on a night like Halloween. I hope sharing this helps someone realize how dangerous it can be to trust the wrong people.